One wrestling event was canceled by the planners after they received death threats from the cartel, while another was suspended after the cartel claimed responsibility for the death of 2 of their acts. Sometimes being in cartel-controlled areas can come with a lot of rules. And unlike the fictional world of wrestling, where mistakes seldom have deadly consequences, the cartel underworld is much more unforgiving. So here are 12 wrestlers who went too far and messed with the wrong cartel. Marato Lepra. The summer of 2022 was the open season for drug-related killings. In fact, it was open season for everyone, including musicians. But unlike Norteño musicians, lucha libre wrestlers had largely escaped drug cartel violence. Well, that was until Marato and Lepra started working with the Santa Rosa de Lima gang, which rivaled the CJNG. The CJNG, a prominent drug cartel operating in the city of Jalisco, was in a fierce battle for control against rival factions. It was within this dangerous backdrop that Marato and Lepra, 2 lucha libre wrestlers, had been living a double life. By day, Lepra worked as a market inspector for the PAN government of Irapuato, and by night he was a luchador, which is wrestler in Spanish. Marato, on the other hand, was a drainage worker. Unknowingly to many, the 2 luchadores, or professional wrestlers in Spanish, had become entangled with the local criminal underworld. Reports suggested that Marato and Lepra, perhaps due to the financial pressures, were associated with the Santa Rosa de Lima gang. This affiliation would prove to be a fatal misstep. In the days leading up to their abduction, there were whispers of tension between the wrestlers and cartel members. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the luchadors seemingly unaware of the grave danger. The community of Irapuato, while accustomed to the presence of cartel violence, was not prepared for what would unfold. Their death was meant to prove that no one was beyond the reach of the CJNG. Maramoto's body was not just discarded, it was displayed with a calculated coldness alongside a banner that bore the undeniable mark of the CJNG. To the colleagues of the lucha libre profession, the CJNG has nothing against you personally. The events involving Lepra Salvador and Marato were direct attacks. This message was a clear sign that the deaths were not random acts of violence, but targeted executions. The banner claimed they were involved with the Santa Rosa de Lima gang, which has been fighting turf battles against the Jalisco cartel and Guanajuato for years. The lucha libre event planners subsequently canceled events, and the suspects continued to roam free. This killing, however, would be linked to the killing of another luchador back in 2022. Juventud Rebelde. In the deadly world of Mexican cartels, crossing paths with the wrong crowd can have deadly consequences. This is the harrowing tale of Juventud Rebelde, a luchador known for his high-flying moves and charismatic presence in the ring. His life took a tragic turn when he became entangled with the notorious Jalisco New Generation cartel, a mistake that would cost him everything. Just a day before his death, Juventud Rebelde had participated in an event at the Lienzo Charro Ignacio Leon Ornelas in Irapuato, alongside Cibernetico and other luchadores. But what happened? What sent a promising luchador to his early grave? It was not clear at the time, but just like Marato and Lepra, Juventud had been caught in the front lines of a war between rival cartels. After a gym session, Juventud Rebelde was ambushed by a group of cartel members who wanted to kidnap him at gunpoint, but he was not one to go down without a fight. The confrontation escalated onto the streets, attracting the attention of bystanders. Out of frustration, the kidnappers brandished their weapons and fatally shot him on the spot, killing him there and then. This single act would turn out to be a perfect example of the volatile nature of being a prominent wrestler in cartel-dominated regions of Mexico. After his death, there were protests, but they led nowhere as the cartel continued to act without resistance. Sam Adonis. While Sam Adonis was not the perfect specimen of what a luchador is, he too would have a confrontation with the cartel that would kick him out of Mexico. According to him, there was a lot of threats involved and a lot of, it was bad. I ended up leaving Mexico because of that. In the world of professional wrestling, the action inside the ring is sometimes matched by the drama outside of it, blurring the line between entertainment and reality. This was never more apparent than in the case of Corey Graves, a WWE commentator known for his sharp wit and incisive commentary. Behind the scenes, Corey was targeted with death threats. These threats, which emerged from the shadows, were not part of a storyline or a promotional stunt. They were real and harrowing. Professional wrestling heels often thrive when they get reactions from fans, but it appears that an exceptionally effective heel performance can sometimes provoke extreme reactions. Such is the case for Corey Graves' brother, Sam Adonis.
And tells us, you guys got to get out of here now. He ended up calming this person down because apparently whenever I was wrestling on the inside, this guy was getting text messages from other unsavory people about how I need to be dealt with, if you will.
Sam Adonis garnered significant attention with his pro-Donald Trump wrestling persona, particularly in Mexico, where this character has attracted substantial negative reactions. It seemed his act had been too convincing for some. Recently, Adonis revealed a disturbing incident on Twitter. According to him, he received threatening messages from a child, including gruesome images and death threats linked to the Mexican cartel, a notoriously dangerous entity. While negative feedback from fans is usually a badge of honor in wrestling, receiving death threats involving violent cartel imagery from an 11-year-old is deeply troubling. He did, however, try to remind fans that everything he does on stage is an act and never truly intended to offend anyone. He would later say, "I know some things make people mad, you just go for it. You know, I don't ever want anyone to be truly offended by what it is, but to the cartels, gimmicks might as well be reality." In regions like Mexico, where the cartel's presence is a serious concern, any threats tied to such groups are taken gravely, regardless of the source. To sugarcoat it, he may need to consider additional security measures. Vampiro.
And I said, "Are you guys gonna kill me?"
Imagine cruising down a deserted highway, the silence of the night your only companion. Suddenly, your world is flipped upside down as you're thrust into a terrifying ordeal that seems ripped straight from a Hollywood script. This is the chilling reality for Vampiro, the iconic wrestler who claims to have been kidnapped in a harrowing encounter with a cartel in Mexico. For Vampiro, this was the perfect example of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The first sign of trouble was subtle, almost innocuous, a toll booth like any other. Vampiro could not be less concerned. There was only one thing on his mind, the events awaiting him in the capital. But as he drove past the toll, that is when his life took a dramatic turn. A truck came out of nowhere and cut him off with its headlights, blinding him and forcing him to a halt. He was confused at first, but when he saw the badge, he felt a little relief. However, Vampiro's initial relief at the thought of federal police quickly turned to suspicion. Why would they stop him here in the dead of night? His question was answered with a jolt as his Hummer was struck from behind, another vehicle pinning him from the driver's side. This was not a routine check. In a flash, one of his kidnappers hit him with the butt of his gun, forced him out of the car and drove off with him. He was being held hostage. On the road, unsure of where he was going, relief came again when his kidnappers were stopped by the police, but for some reason, they were able to convince the police that he was one of theirs. Vampiro would recount this in an interview.
Then I heard, and this is what ruined my life, "Don't worry, he's one of ours." And I was like, I'm dead. Cop pulled over, they got out and they talked, blah, 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 blah. The cop took off and they took us to a secluded forest.
The ordeal reached a fever pitch as he was taken to a mountain. The mountain was desolate, and Vampiro was already fearing the worst. But in a weird twist, the captors had a change of heart and ordered him to leave. The reason for this sudden change of heart remained a mystery that Vampiro and the others could not afford to question. 2021 Metape Fair. In November 2021, the Metape Fair was abruptly terminated due to severe threats from a local drug cartel, La Familia Michoacana. The fair, which was to include a wrestling show by the Lucha Libre AABA Worldwide and Big Lucha on November 10th, never saw its end. The threats came in the form of menacing banners displayed on overpasses around the venue, explicitly warning performers scheduled for the fair. According to Mexico News Daily, the banners stated, "Urgent message. We inform all the artists who are going to perform in the Metape Fair not to perform at that venue, to avoid the spilling of innocent blood, including theirs. Due to the actions of that bum, the businessman Mario Garcia, they are prohibited from performing. Respect our organization, and we will respect your lives. Familia Michoacana." The situation escalated to violence on November 5th, when a bus transporting members of the band La Adictiva, who were en route to perform at the fair, was attacked with gunfire. This incident prompted the fair's organizers and local authorities to shut down the event entirely. The cancellation occurred just days before the planned AAA Big Lucha wrestling event. The AAA did not make an official statement regarding the cancellation. This silence speaks to the gravity and fear instilled by cartel activities in the region. Fortunately, no members of AAA or Big Lucha were injured, as they had not yet arrived at the troubled location. Ana Godinez Gonzalez. Before the specter of fear cast its shadow over their lives, Ana Godinez Gonzalez family lived in Aguascalientes, Mexico. It was a life marked by the vibrant culture, the warmth of a close-knit community, and the bustling enterprise of Carlos, Ana's father, who ran a successful car dealership. But all of the good in their life would come crashing down when her father would cross the cartel. The city, known for its festivals and friendly faces, also harbored a darker element. Local businesses often found themselves at the mercy of cartels, entities that operated with impunity and struck fear into the hearts of those they targeted. Ana's father was ordered to pay a hefty ransom or face the unthinkable consequence of having their children taken from them. The threat was not an empty one. Carlos had already witnessed the cartel's brutality when they made an example of his dealership, riddling his fleet of cars with bullets, a grim warning of what was to come should he fail to comply with their demands. The family's sanctuary had been breached, and their sense of security was irrevocably broken. They would escape under the guise of a vacation, a clever ploy by her father to protect her innocence and to buy time as they planned their clandestine departure. Carlos, her father, told her they were going on a surprise vacation to Disneyland. With hearts heavy and suitcases packed with more than just belongings, they moved to Canada. Upon landing in Canada, reality set in. There was no Disneyland, no familiar sights or sounds, just the cold embrace of Vancouver. The family found themselves in New Westminster, a far cry from the warm streets of Aguascalientes they called home. The hotel they checked into was nothing like the resorts that dot the landscape of Anaheim. It was, as Ana would later recall, a place that stood in stark contrast to the fantasy they had been led to believe. However, this was a better fate than death, as it at least gave them hope and provided her with an opportunity to become one of the top wrestlers in the world. Elder Ramos. Elder Ramos, the MMA fighter, would have first-row seats to the brutal reality of cartel retribution. Elder was born in the bustling city of Cali. His life and every other person in the city was entangled in the ever-present shadow of the Cali cartel. Elder Ramos, the youngest of 7 siblings, grew up idolizing his 3 older brothers. These brothers walked the perilous line between right and wrong and found themselves caught in the web of the country's notorious drug trade. They served the cartel, not out of malice, but as a means to survive in a place where options were scarce and the allure of quick money was a siren call too strong to resist. The involvement of the Ramos brothers with the cartel was a double-edged sword. It brought financial stability to a family in need, but came with a price far greater than any sum of money. It was a life of looking over one's shoulder, of whispered conversations, and of a constant gnawing fear that one day, the violence they were a part of would come knocking at their door. And it did. The day the truck came winding down the hill would turn out to be the most haunting day of his life. He would see his brother's body bound and lifeless, adorned in a soccer jersey so familiar to Elder, was a message from the cartel. It was a brutal reminder that in the drug trade, debts are settled in blood, and no one is untouchable. The death of his brothers was a turning point for Elder. His mother, knowing she could not guarantee his safety in the city, decided to send him to the US, where, as they say, the rest is history. Dino Bravo. In professional wrestling, few stories are as captivating and shrouded in mystery as that of Dino Bravo. A powerhouse in the ring, Bravo's career saw him rise through the ranks to become one of the sport's most formidable wrestlers. But beyond the bright lights of the wrestling world, a shadow loomed over Bravo's life, one that would lead to a chilling and mysterious death. Montreal in the early 1990s was a hotbed for illegal activity, and the lucrative world of cigarette smuggling was on the rise. It was here that Bravo, with his imposing figure and reputation for toughness, found a niche. He became involved with a criminal organization, leveraging his notoriety and connections to facilitate the smuggling of contraband cigarettes across the Canada-United States border. The illegal cigarette trade was a dangerous game, ruled by powerful crime families and fraught with risk. Bravo, however, seemed undeterred by the perilous nature of his new venture. He was said to be working with the notorious Montreal-based Rizzuto crime family, one of the most influential mafia organizations in Canada. His role in the operation was significant. He was not just a figurehead, but an active participant in the smuggling ring. As the stakes grew higher, so did the tension. Bravo's involvement with organized crime was becoming more entrenched, and the risks were mounting. The world of illegal smuggling was a far cry from the scripted battles of the wrestling ring, and Bravo was now in a fight with real and dangerous consequences. On the evening of March 10, 1993, Bravo was at his home in Laval, Quebec, watching hockey on television. His wife and daughter were out of the house, and he was alone. It was during these quiet hours that tragedy struck. Bravo was found lifeless in his armchair, the victim of a brutal execution-style murder. He had been shot multiple times, a clear message from the perpetrators that this was a professional hit. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation, and the wrestling community was left to mourn one of their own, taken in such a violent and senseless manner. The investigation into Bravo's murder was extensive, but the leads were few. No one was ever charged with the crime, and the case remains unsolved to this day. There's a lot of speculation about who was responsible for this and why Bravo was targeted. Some believe it was a hit ordered by the very crime families he had been working with, possibly a result of a deal gone wrong or a power struggle within the organization. Johnny K9. In the gritty underbelly of Canadian crime was Ion Croitoru, also known as Johnny K9, a former pro wrestler turned notorious gang leader. His life was a maelstrom of violence and infamy. In 2013, the law finally caught up with Johnny K9. He was arrested and faced with first-degree murder charges, a grim testament to the severity of his alleged crimes. However, Croitoru struck a deal with the prosecution in a move that surprised many. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and conspiracy to traffic in cocaine and marijuana in exchange for a 13-year sentence, reduced by the time he had already spent in pre-trial custody. This marked Croitoru's third federal prison term. Prison did little to quell the legend of Johnny K9. Even behind bars, his reputation loomed large. When he applied for parole, he downplayed his role in the gang war, attributing his actions to false bravado and a desire to impress his new associates. He claimed he was no angel, but insisted that his notoriety often led to him being blamed for more than he had done. Croitoru maintained that he would never kill anyone, despite the violent image that clung to him. In August 2016, Croitoru was released on statutory parole, but his freedom came with stringent conditions. He was to avoid any individuals involved in gangs or organized crime, and was expressly forbidden from setting foot in the city of Hamilton. He pleaded with the parole board to allow him to return to Ontario to prove he was a changed man, even volunteering to wear an electronic ankle monitor. He spoke of his desire to focus on being a family man, to distance himself from the criminal past that had defined much of his life. But fate had other plans for Johnny K9. Just 6 months after his release, he was found unconscious in a Toronto halfway house, his electronic monitoring bracelet still clasped around his thick ankle. The staff's discovery of his lifeless body sent shockwaves through the community. The man who had survived the most dangerous corners of organized crime had met an end that was officially deemed to be from natural causes. Yet the suddenness of his death, the whispers of suspicion, and the disbelief from old associates suggested there was more to the story. The question on everyone's lips was whether Johnny K9, a man who had lived by the sword, had indeed died by it, or if the cause was as mundane as the authorities claimed. Could one of those he ratted during the plea deal have killed him? I guess we will never know. Bruno Sartino and Freddie Blassie. In the golden era of professional wrestling, where theatricality often blurred the lines between reality and performance, two icons, Bruno Sartino and Freddie Blassie, embodied the perfect hero and villain. Their dedication to kayfabe, the unspoken rule of maintaining character to preserve wrestling's narrative illusion, elevated their rivalry to legendary status. Yet their adherence to these roles would soon entangle them in a real-life crisis involving the mob, blurring the lines between their in-ring personas and actual danger. Freddie Blassie, famed for his villainous character, enjoyed the jeers of wrestling fans. It made him more notorious as he adopted extreme antics like filing his teeth so he would look more fearsome. His provocative style made him a perfect antagonist to the admired heroes of wrestling, particularly Bruno Sartino, a revered figure among fans, especially within the Italian-American community. Their careers led to a highly anticipated face-off on June 26, 1964, at Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City, New Jersey. The match was set as a champion versus champion bout, attracting a massive crowd eager to witness Sartino, the hero, conquer the despised Blassie. As the match unfolded, Blassie's relentless villainy reached its peak, inciting fury among spectators by using underhanded tactics and directly engaging with the crowd in a manner that felt personal. The turning point of the evening occurred when Blassie, capitalizing on a momentarily incapacitated referee, secured an unsatisfactory victory over Sartino by technicality, which sent the crowd into an uproar. His continued presence in the ring during the chaos escalated the fans' fury, culminating in a dangerously hostile environment. In the midst of the disorder, Blassie inadvertently found himself in Sartino's locker room, surrounded by not only wrestling figures, but also members of the Italian-American community, some with mob affiliations. The situation escalated when Jilly Rizzo, a known associate of Frank Sinatra and fan of Sartino, confronted Blassie with a gun, mistaking the scripted villainy for genuine malfeasance. In a critical moment where fiction met harsh reality, Sartino intervened, ensuring Blassie's safety by clarifying the theatrical nature of their conflict. This incident was not only a true example of the intense influence of kayfabe, but also demonstrated the dangers when the fictional narratives of wrestling spill over into real life. For Sartino and Blassie, their commitment to their roles nearly led to tragic consequences. Gino Hernandez. In the high-stakes world of professional wrestling, charisma and controversy often go hand in hand. But for Gino Hernandez, the line between in-ring persona and personal demons is thin. Known as the handsome half-breed, Hernandez captivated audiences with his flamboyant style and brash attitude. Yet behind the scenes, a darker narrative unfolded, one marred by addiction and whispered rumors of dangerous associations. Then, in the cold grasp of February 1996, the wrestling world was shaken to its core when Hernandez was found dead under mysterious circumstances. What followed was a tale of intrigue, speculation, and disbelief that has persisted for decades. On February 4, 1986, concerned with Wolf's well-being, 2 WCCW officials and several local police officers broke into his Highland Park to discover the decomposing corpse of the wrestling superstar who had been dead for an estimated 3 to 4 days. The initial shock rippled through the community as the police launched an investigation into the circumstances of his death. The condo, a place that had once been a sanctuary for the wrestler, became the center of a grim inquiry. The absence of a locked deadbolt, which was out of character for Hernandez, known for his meticulous security habits, raised immediate red flags. The specter of foul play loomed large, and for a moment the world considered the possibility that Hernandez had been the victim of a homicide. As the days passed, the autopsy reports painted a different picture. The cause of death was ruled a cocaine overdose, with a staggering amount of the substance found in his system, 5 times the lethal dose, along with traces in his stomach. This revelation sent shockwaves through the wrestling community and beyond. The man who had once graced the ring with such vitality and vigor had fallen victim to the vices many feared would be his undoing. The investigations turned from homicide to accidental overdose did little to quell the whispers and speculation. The question on everyone's lips was whether this was truly an accident or if there was more to the story than met the eye. The ruling of cocaine overdose did little to silence the murmurs of disbelief that echoed through the halls of the wrestling world. The skepticism remained, with many close to Gino Hernandez finding the official explanation hard to swallow. David Manning, a WCW official, pointed to the excessive amount of cocaine found in Hernandez's system, a quantity that far exceeded what would typically result in death. This, coupled with the presence of the drug in his stomach, suggested to some a scenario more sinister than a mere overdose. The unlocked deadbolt on Hernandez's door was another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. Manning knew Hernandez as a man who was meticulous about his security, always ensuring the deadbolt was locked. This seemingly minor detail fueled the fire of doubt and suggested that perhaps Hernandez had not been alone on that fateful night. Ricky Doan. On the night of December 8, 1963, the vibrant entertainment district of Tokyo was alive with activity, a common backdrop for the likes of Ricky Doan, a revered giant in Japanese professional wrestling. Known offstage as Mitsuhiro Momota, Ricky Doan mingled among Tokyo's elite when the night's festive mood turned grim. An encounter with Katsushi Murata, a low-level gangster with Yakuza connections, escalated from a potentially minor confrontation to a historical tragedy. The exact cause of the altercation remains unclear. Some say there was a harsh exchange of words. Others suggest Katsushi had disrespected Mitsuhiro Momota. However, the conflict quickly became physical. Ricky Doan seemed to dominate the scuffle with ease until Murata, cornered and desperate, drew a concealed knife and stabbed Ricky Doan in the torso. The crowd was stunned as the indomitable wrestler was visibly wounded, but displaying his renowned toughness, he continued his evening as if minimally affected. Ignoring the severity of his injury, Ricky Doan initially refused immediate, sustained medical treatment, opting instead to continue with his excesses. As Ricky Doan's condition deteriorated, the public and media, who had long viewed him as an invincible figure, were shocked. Despite urgent medical care, his health continued to fail, burdened by years of physical toll and a relentless lifestyle. Ricky Doan died on December 15, 1963, just a week after the incident that seemed trivial at the moment. His death plunged the nation into mourning and marked a significant moment in Japanese pop culture. The man who had been a symbol of strength and resilience, carrying the aspirations of many, was suddenly gone under circumstances that contrasted sharply with the heroic persona he had embodied. The loss of Ricky Doan left a void in the hearts of fans and a deep imprint on the history of professional wrestling in Japan. Would you reconsider your career if it brought such hazardous threats? Share your thoughts in the comments. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.